recording on my phone and on the recording thingy.
Yes.
So,
Yes, thank you very much.
All right. One second, and then we will go live. Okay, guys, you can start.
Okay. So welcome everyone to our online course and workshop for a manifesto for the Just City, organized by TU Delft in collaboration with several other universities around the world. The UN Habitat World Urban Campaign to commemorate Urban October, and the Pakhuis Deswijzer, a cultural platform in Amsterdam that hosts activities connected to the topics of cities for all. Well, my name is Hugo, and I'm here with my colleagues Andres Leone, Juliana Gonçalves, Roberto Rocco, and Caroline Newton will join us a little bit later. So, and we are all members of the Center for the Just City, set up here at the Faculty of Architecture and the Built Environment at the TU Delft to talk about social sustainability and spatial justice. And we are thrilled to have you here today and happy that many of you have also decided to participate in our call to write a manifesto for the Just City. And also, just so you know, this event is being broadcasted live on YouTube and also being recorded for the podcast Duty of Care, which is our podcast on issues of the Just City, produced by Roberto Rocco and also me. And there are several episodes available at the link that's going to be made available on the chat. And there you have like the links for the Instagram page. Roberto?
All right. Today I want to talk about something really serious. We cannot skip the subject. If we wish to speak about the Just City, we cannot ignore the conflicts that knock at our doors. The ongoing war in Ukraine, in Nagorno-Karabakh, in Mali, and now also Palestine and Israel. In the strongest possible terms, we condemn the attacks on innocent civilians, the indiscriminate bombing on civilian targets, and the cutting of infrastructure in the region. As this humanitarian crisis unfolds, our hearts are with the affected communities. At the same time, we are astonished at the inaction of the world governments in using diplomacy in a more decisive way to protect vulnerable lives and open, safeguard humanitarian corridors. As scholars and students addressing justice, we cannot skip the subject. We want Palestinians to live. We want Israelis to live. And this life is only possible if we embrace politics, if we embrace the politics of negotiation that seeks compromise and respect for life and for peace. I think we will have an opportunity to discuss these things a little bit later. I understand it's super difficult to talk about these subjects, but now I'll leave the floor to Andres, who will take us to the subject and the speaker of today.
Yeah, thank you, Roberto. Difficult to speak. Thank you for your heartfelt commentary. I'm gonna present the speaker for today. In our last lecture, our guest Titus showed us the importance of substituting the phrase planning for with planning with. And in his wonderful intervention, he talked about how achieving justice comes with promoting dialogue with sometimes non-traditional allies and crafting a win-win solution. Today's topic is linked to one of the biggest challenges that we are facing as a humanity, where actors seem to speak for their own interests, even neglecting the existence of a problem that has huge impact in even socially. We are talking about, you guessed it, well, the climate crisis. And while global leaders don't seem to take sufficient action, some groups of people, especially represented by the young generations, have demanded actions and has given a little bit of hope on a more sustainable and just future. Activism has had a fundamental role in fighting for a more equitable world. And without it, we wouldn't have overthrown oppressive regimes, advanced initiatives like LGBTQ+ rights, gender equity, and even slavery. So activism is important because it's a catalyst for movement and a representation of the real democracy. In summary, let us recognize the transformative power of activism and its pivotal role in shaping the world that we aspire to create. So today we have an exceptional guest. Hello, Martine Doppen, who is powerful and energetic activist who fights for a clean and fair world, including at Milieudefensie, the Dutch environmental organization. She's a young queer woman that has a strong vision of climate justice and radical change. Martine was born in a small village in Achterhoek, in the Achterhoek region. I'm sorry for my pronunciation in Dutch. I tried my best. I translated with Google Translate before. And 18 years later, she was a student in Amsterdam. She found the space to speak about gender inequality, racism, and the climate crisis. And while studying international public care at BU, she worked on innovative projects in home care. She set up a training program on climate justice and worked for the climate case against Shell. She is one of the boosters of the 2019 Climate March and supported school strikes. Without further ado, I would like to give the floor to you, Martine.
Thank you so much for this wonderful introduction. And also thanks for Roberto to holding the space for all the people that are suffering in Palestine and Gaza and Israel at the moment. And for all of you who are connected to this struggle in one way or the other. I'm with you. We're having a lot of demonstrations here in Amsterdam too, and trying to speak up against our politicians who are not telling the real story, which is also involved a lot by propaganda. The thing that we're talking about today, as all wars have a lot of propaganda involved. So yeah, we will also dive into that a little bit from the history perspective today. But just wanted to share my deep respect and strength for the people who are speaking up in this difficult time. And yeah, we are together in this, and together the world will make sure that all people have access to basic human rights and the rights to exist in this world. So yeah, I'm really honored to be here and speak to you about fossil fuel propaganda. I will open up the presentation in a bit, and we will first dive into the history of the propaganda machine of big oil. Then I will explain how we got to our strategy of our campaign with fossil-free advertising, or reclame fossielvrij. That's the Dutch name of our organization. And on the end, we will explore what a city could look like if we ban the propaganda machine of the big oil of the fossil fuel industry. Just to check in before we start, do we do all questions on the end, or should I also be aware that there will be questions in between?
It's usually at the end.
Exactly. So we do
what we ask people to do is to put their questions in the chat so we can start to see them coming. But yeah, more towards the end you can answer.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yes. Thank you so much. Oh, and I forgot to share my pronouns. So I use she, her pronouns or they, them. Yeah, let's try to share my screen. And we're going to start. Yes. Yeah, so first I would like to share a little bit about the history of my activism. So After my studies, I became involved in the youth climate movement in the Netherlands and abroad. I was a board member of the Jongeren Milieuactief, that was Friends of the Earth, Young Friends of the Earth, the Netherlands. And we were connected to a lot of grassroots groups everywhere in the world. And then I went to the first COP in Katowice. The COP is like the Conference of Parties of the United Nations. And then I got to know like all the stories around the world of the people that are fighting this climate crisis. And I was like, wow, I have to learn so much to understand like how we are going to do this. So I got really inspired, and also I did my first climate action ever in the COP building. So you see this picture on the left side, which says, which side are you on? So we blocked the full hallway to the negotiation spaces. So the negotiators couldn't enter anymore. They had to first have a conversation with us about what real climate justice is. So that was really inspiring. And then I got involved also more and more in the Netherlands, and we brought a lot of people together, and the momentum really like gained. And I learned a lot from Milieudefensie, Friends of the Earth of the Netherlands. It's a big NGO. I also worked afterwards there. So first with Young Friends of the Earth, and later on with Friends of the Earth of the Netherlands. We organized this big climate march, and for the first time 40,000 people came together in the rain fighting for climate justice, and a lot of new people got involved with climate activism. And with Milieudefensie, we also started a court case against Shell, the biggest oil company from the Netherlands. And we won this court case. And this court case is now being copied also by a lot of organizations around the world. And this was very, very new because we didn't ask for any money, but we asked them to change their policy in line with the Paris Agreement. They're not doing it at the moment, so we keep on pushing it for it. But this has inspired a lot of other court cases around the world. And also I'm involved in like intersectional climate activism. So also like framing the climate crisis as a colonial crisis, and looking to the context of colonial history, and how it is possible that companies as Shell have such a lot of power, and what their history, for example, is in Nigeria. And I'm also involved in actions with Extinction Rebellion. And in the very right, like you see me talking with politicians. So I will also dive into more like the strategy of movement building. So bringing a lot of people together to show like what people power is, and then having direct actions. So having creative actions where you find like a lot of media attention for it, but you actually don't need so many people, but you do something that is disruptive, which gains a lot of attention. And then at the same time doing this lobby work. So having direct contact with politicians. And actually you can have these roles all at the same time. So what for me, I try to do like having different identities, go like both to disruptive actions and talk to politicians, and have like being an organizer and focusing on movement building. So I just want to share these things beforehand, because it will later on also come back in the strategy of our campaign against fossil advertising and the big propaganda of the fossil fuel industry. So at the moment, I'm working for Reclame Fossilvrij, or fossil-free advertising. And we did a lot of research on the propaganda machine of the oil industry, oil and gas and coal industry, actually. And we also learned a lot from the anti-lobby against the big tobacco industry. So we say, hey, the climate crisis is a health crisis because of fossil fuels and air pollution. Many people die around the world. So actually 13 million people die every year because of preventable environmental causes, including air pollution. And that's done by mainly big companies, but also by groups of people using a car, for example. But we point out especially those companies, as they influence also the production side. But if you look to smoking these days, where actually there's a lot of regulations for already, and everybody knows like smoking is bad. There's an agreement that we don't advertise for it. But actually these days, more people die because of fossil fuels than because of smoking. So we do make these comparisons, as also the history of the propaganda machine of both industries looks a lot like each other. And they also learned from each other along the way. So I will dive into that in a bit. So first, I would like to take you to this man called Ivy Lee. And Ivy Lee, this is like back when there wasn't like, it was just like the First World War was there in the beginning of the 19th century. And Ivy Lee, he used to work for a lot of coal companies, but also for railroad companies. And there were a lot of problems with these railroad companies. So they were very often understaffed. And because of that, there were many problems. And actually, people died also because it was unsafe. And those companies, they were being held responsible and they had a problem. So the governments, the local governments, they made regulations for it. And the railroad companies weren't really happy with this because of those regulations, they had to make sure that there was full coverage of employees working, and the crew was fully crewed. And so they went to Ivy Lee, and Ivy Lee had like a good solution for this. He kind of like changed the story a little bit. So he found out that words really did matter. And also that whoever told the story first actually hold the truth. So even before people could write about it in a bad way, he was already writing the story about it. And for example, they used full crew before, but then he changed it to extra crew, which gives the idea that they were doing their best already, and they were actually even doing something extra. So they couldn't be held responsible anymore. And this is like influencing a lot of people, like sometimes not even very consciously, but very often unconsciously. And this is actually like the start of this propaganda machine. And he actually uses the truth to sell lies. And this is being used a lot these days by fossil fuel companies still. But Ivy Lee, he was actually like one of the fathers of public relations, as it's called, and of propaganda. And he also found out that if you send up mixed messages in the world, that actually gives a confusion, and if confusion is your goal, because people, in the beginning, they thought, okay, all the railroad companies and the coal companies, they are doing the wrong thing. But if you send out mixed messages, people will at least question that. So that's how he changed narratives. And from the 1914, he started working for the Rockefellers. And Rockefeller, that was already like, the name wasn't really seen as positive, because they were involved in big oil companies, they did monopolies, they broke through like things. There wasn't really like a popular name. And the son of this old Rockefeller, he owned a coal mine, the Colorado coal mine. And also in the coal mines, people worked so much, even they worked until they died. People died because of really bad working conditions, too many hours, and people got really angry and they started organizing themselves in a union. And there were a lot of strikes going on in Colorado. And Rockefeller was really scared because the strikes weren't really helping his company. So he actually started to send armed guards there, and he shut down the strike. He even set tents on fire and shooting on the protesters, and thereby 22 people were killed, including 11 children and 2 women. And these people, the children and women, died because of all the smoke, not because they were killed, but like the indirect consequences. And this goes into the history as the Ludlow massacre. And it made like the family Rockefeller, but also this son, very unpopular, as you might think, like even more unpopular than his father. And Ivy Lee was asked to give the family a new image. And that's what he did, actually. In just 20 years, Lee had turned John D. Rockefeller from a man routinely described as the most hated man in America into a kindly philanthropist who was widely admired. And he did that through a combination of tactics that have been used from everyone from dictators to CEOs ever since, and that are still very much being used by the fossil fuel industry today. And this whole story about Ivy Lee, you can also find back in a podcast called Drilled in season 3, and it's called Madmen of Climate Denial. And then also Ivy Lee, in those years that he was turning the Rockefellers from the most hated man in the US to a philanthropist, he was also involved in many oil companies. And he was actually involved in the birth of the American Petroleum Institute. And the American Petroleum Institute, actually during the First World War, they worked together to provide the war from oil and gas. Because in a war times, a lot of fossil fuels are needed. So the American Petroleum Institute brought these oil companies together, and they made sure there was enough oil and gas for the war. And they thought, okay, if we can work together in times of war, then we can also work together in times of peace. So after the World War I, they collaborated to actually make the world addicted to oil and gas, to make sure that everybody understood that oil was needed to build a strong economy, and that one could not live without oil. And therefore they needed this big propaganda machine. So they didn't choose between media relations and lobbying, they just did everything. They influenced in the film industry, the new press, and they had put a lot of money on it. And also, for example, Shell, the company Shell, the one we are still fighting today, every year, I think in 2021, still they provided the American Petroleum Institute with 10 million. So they also were funded a lot by a lot of big oil companies. And also these oil companies were in the board of the American Petroleum Institute, shaping also where the American Petroleum Institute was going to. So for more than a century, the IPA, the American Petroleum Institute, has been running a multi-pronged propaganda campaign and is indoctrinating people around the world with the idea that the oil industry is fundamental for our life. And it was involved in both the First World War and the Second World War, and is now still being carried around. And then there's also two more people. There's a lot of these guys mainly who are involved in the propaganda machine. They're all in the podcast. Really interesting to learn about it, I think. But these two I also wanted to name because they're still one of the two biggest PR companies in the world today are still Edelman and Hill and Knowlton. And Edelman is also involved in a lot of greenwashing from Shell. And Edelman, he found out about Lee's strategy during the World War II, and he started working on psychological warfare. So how to make sure that the whole world wants, for example, get involved in war if before a country thought that peace was better. So they used a lot of these propaganda to make sure that there was support for war, for example. But he was also the invention of fake grassroots groups. So yeah, I'm involved in a grassroots group. There's people who are worried about the climate crisis. We get together. We are just citizens. We are not being funded by everything in the beginning. Now, at the moment, we do get funding, but when we started, we were not funded. It was all volunteers. And if you are just a group of people volunteering for the good cause, people will take you seriously, and people will think, okay, this is a good case. We have to support this. So he invented these fake grassroots groups where it looked like it was citizens worried for change or for something, but then actually he paid them a lot. And it looked like they were grassroots groups while they were actually just paid by the industries. And they're also doing the same still with the tobacco industry. So for tobacco, there's a lot of regulations these days, but it's still trying to find loopholes. So what I learned from an activist here in the Netherlands, her name is Wanda de Kanter, and she's a doctor, a lung physician, and she works for decades against the tobacco industry. And she said, she did a research about this, and the tobacco industry is now actually forming groups of volunteers who are then picking cigarettes from the streets. So there's less trash, but with this data, they now know better where to sell cigarettes because they know where people are smoking cigarettes. So then they put places where they sell cigarettes. So still these tactics are being used today a lot, and most of the times we have no idea if you don't dive into it very deep. And Edelman is doing a lot of Shell greenwashing, and we'll also dive into a lot of Shell greenwashing later on. And then I would like to also name John W. Hill, and he actually brought the tobacco, oil, and plastic industry kind of together. He was the founder also of Hill and Knowlton, and that PR company also advised last year the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. So they actually did all the greenwashing of the COP27. It was a really big greenwashing campaign going on there. I also went there, and it was real. So these companies still hold most of the power in PR these days. But the way that he brought these companies together is that he put them in the same trade groups. So actually the oil and gas companies, they were more like the invention, they were closer to the invention of the PR and the press release and all that. And later on tobacco joined more, and John Hill brought them together. And also that's why there is a lot of cigarettes being sold at gas stations. It's the most popular place for cigarette sales. And then they came up with the filter as well. In collaboration with Exxon and Shell, they invented the cigarette filter. The cigarette filter is actually a fake thing. It doesn't really work. Or maybe it filters out a little bit, but it was more actually invented as a smoke screen. So they did a lot of fake research that the filter was going to filter out all these things. There's also a big court case of Wanda de Kanter, the activist, the lung physician. She started a court case against the tobacco industry because they put small holes in the filters. So if you would test the filter on a machine, most of the toxins would go out of the little holes, and they would measure less of the toxins. But if you smoke, your fingers are on these little holes, so you still get the toxins and all the nicotine in. So that was the whole filter, and this filter was invented by Exxon and Shell to provide us a smoke screen. Because if they wouldn't find out, if they would believe that this filter was actually helping against the bad effects of smoking, also research would not focus so much on the bad health effects of smoke of fossil fuels. And Hill also worked together with Dr. Cook Little. He was a physician, he did some cancer research, but not a lot. And he just first, as they also turned Rockefeller into a philanthropist, they first turned him into kind of a famous doctor. And then they paid him a lot to how do you say this, publish research that was saying that smoking is not so bad and fossil fuels are not so bad for your health. And it was a fake research also. And this is still being used a lot by the fossil fuel industry. There's a lot of misinformation about the climate crisis. We are getting through it now, but a decade ago it was everywhere. So this is also, where it was born, actually, this misinformation with Hill. And now these days you see a lot of greenwashing, a lot of misinformation still. It's in a different scale, I think. I think it is, for most people, maybe less obvious or less bad than if you actually pay a doctor to do fake research, or you pay. But still, the greenwashing is very real, and I will dive into a few examples also later. I also would like to point out an example that maybe some of you already know. It is an example of Edward Bernays. He was already in his late in his career when he came up with this campaign called Torches of Freedom. It's a very famous campaign actually by the tobacco industry. And actually this is where all these things come together. So press release, a very strong image. And it was because like in that time, many people died because of cancer, because of smoking. But the problem was that these people died and therefore didn't buy cigarettes anymore. That's what they say. The problem was, it was, and another problem was that women didn't smoke. So he actually came up with this idea that if to use the emancipation of women to get women to smoke. And he paid a lot of women to smoke in the middle of the day on Wall Street. And he put out press releases so everybody knew what was going to happen. And it was everywhere. It was on TV, it was in newspapers. They couldn't stop talking about it. The women were smoking, the torches of freedom. And this whole framing around it was really powerful. And it made a lot of women start smoking. So this campaign actually goes into the history as a very good example of a strong campaign. Well, everybody now thinks like, oh my God, this is so horrible and so bad. So what we have seen the last decades is that there's been a lot of inaction on climate. And it doesn't start or end with climate denial. There's a whole propaganda machine that was built before it, and that we have to understand in order to dismantle it. And it was that this science denial worked because it came on the heels of a 100-year propaganda campaign. So the fossil fuel industry helped to create the PR industry, and the publishers came up with this disinformation and manipulation tactics that they developed for the oil, tobacco, and also the chemical companies for decades. So that's a bit of an overview of how it all started and what we are still dismantling today. So the need for activism against this propaganda machine in times of a climate catastrophe, because we know that fossil fuel industries are killing lives, both because of air pollution, but also because of the climate crisis. The climate crisis is the biggest threat to human health in our century. So to see this from a health perspective is also a very strong thing to do, I think. So that's also what we do in our campaign, because many people, if we're talking about, a crisis in the future, it also makes it less touchable. People don't really understand what it will mean for them. But if we connect it to health, I think that also makes sure that people understand, okay, how is it going to involve in their life. The advertising and all the propaganda of the fossil fuel industry, they tell a very different story. They tell a story about like how green growth will save us and how they are actually already changing and that they are part of this change. And it also, because of this advertising, there's also a lot of public money still going to this fossil fuel industries. So in the Netherlands, we just last week, a motion on fossil subsidies was adopted for the first time in Parliament. So we did with Extinction Rebellion a lot of actions on fossil subsidies, because every year $46 billion is going to the fossil fuel industry from our public money. And it's not only like direct money, but also they don't pay taxes. So all these things together, they receive actually a discount or subsidy from 46 billion. I think it is between 37 and 46 billion. So still, these 100 years of psychological warfare, they make us believe that we still need these fossil fuel companies in our life. I think we are starting to understand that we don't need fossil fuels in our life, but we still believe that fossil fuel companies will have the solutions for the climate crisis, because still massively they are working together with our politicians. Generally, like as an activist or as any NGO, we are 9 times less have access to our politicians than these industries have. Banning actually all advertising in public spaces, online, and all these fake stories is removing one of the pillars of the fossil fuel industry that is keeping them alive, and that's now giving them all the power. So with our movement, the fossil-free movement in the Netherlands and beyond, we are very much focused on dismantling all these pillars from the fossil fuel industry. And one big pillar is this advertising, but also another one is, for example, their access to our politicians. So the tobacco industry is also not able to lobby anymore. But last year at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, there were 604 people from the fossil fuel industries actively lobbying against climate policy. So they are just everywhere. And by stopping the greenwashing propaganda, we also can take back our public spaces, because it is everywhere and it is made to unconsciously influence us. So we don't actually maybe see it all day long, but it influences us a lot. So by taking back our public spaces, we can also change this space and turn it into something positive. And we'll have a few examples from that. And as the tobacco industry also learned a lot from the fossil fuel industry and the fossil fuel industry from the tobacco industry, we are also learning from the anti-lobby against the big tobacco industry. Because after 25 years, we have now a treaty that makes sure also that there's a lot of laws in a lot of nations against tobacco. And it took 25 years to form this treaty, but we don't have that time. So we try to learn a lot and then do it better. And the anti-lobby against tobacco is also run by a lot of healthcare workers. So in our campaign, we also work a lot together with healthcare workers to show like how fossil fuel industries are killing our lives, are threatening our health, and therefore we need to take action against them. So this is an old picture of the Marlboro Man watching over a children's schoolyard, actually. And especially targeting the very young people, children, to start smoking. These days, they're doing it with vapes. So vapes are actually invented by the tobacco industry, because if children become addicted to nicotine, they also change more easily to tobacco. And they're like also making money with the vapes, because people are buying vapes all the time, but less with vapes than tobacco. So it's still important for them to change to tobacco. So that we're not done with targeting the tobacco industry, and I'm still in good contact with these activists who are working it. So we still work together, and I think that's important. But here you see like how, in the first place, how well it worked. So in the 1970s, the US banned cigarette ads on the radio and television, and it created so much space afterwards for other preventive measures. So it was not that only those ad bans made like the cancer rates go down and made the tobacco use go down, but it was like a starting of something that accelerated it. And there became taxes. Nicotine, like smoking, became banned in public areas such as cafes and so on. So it really has it is something that needs to go away before becomes space for other measures too. And the same we had with the Marlboro Man, we still have it everywhere with the fossil fuel industry. There's a lot of the most fossil fuel companies, they don't advertise with fuels, but they advertise with how green they are. So this is one advertisement from Shell. Yes, you can now drive carbon neutral. We did a lot of research on to show that carbon neutrality doesn't work like this. Actually, there is also a watchdog in most cities, in most countries. And the watchdog of advertising is actually also against greenwashing. So greenwashing, somehow there's no really a law for it. It's really difficult also to say, okay, there's no law yet of this is greenwashing, this is not. So you are allowed to do this and this, but you cannot mislead. And the advertising watchdog in the Netherlands has the responsibility to to measure this, to take measurements on this. So what we did, for example, also with this was also in the Netherlands in advertising, and then we went to this watchdog and we said, hey, this is misleading. And we won. We won, I think, in total like 15 times from Shell and from KLM, and we also used this a lot to get publicity, because to start such a small case, and we are not so many people in our small grassroots group, so it helps a lot with getting attention with actually just a small action. But yeah, then you win the case, and they are already in the meantime doing the next campaign. So it's always behind it. So it's never a solution. But by doing it so many times, you can also show like, hey, the current system doesn't work. But yeah, these fossil advertisings are everywhere. They're in the newspapers a lot. They're in our public spaces. They're on TV, online a lot. Shell is doing a lot of LinkedIn also. And you find also, for example, during important political decision moments, there's more advertising from the fossil fuel industry. So sometimes even companies that don't sell anything, they still make advertising if there is a threat for regulations. So these advertisings are not only to sell more things, but they're very often to influence politics. Because if the public is thinking in a nice way about your company, then it's easier to block regulations against that company. So for fossil fuel propaganda in cities, it looks a lot like advertising for oil, gas, and coal companies. Coal companies often don't sell directly things to citizens, but they make advertising for regulations often, against regulations. And also companies that are heavily dependent on oil, gas, and coal, such as the aviation industry, flight companies, fossil car companies, and also cruise ships. And NRC, that's a newspaper in the Netherlands, is actually being seen as quite a good newspaper. And over the last years, they had a lot of advertising for cruise ships to Antarctica. And the advertising thing they used for it is that you could see climate change in real life with this trip. So you also want to see climate change in real life. Now take this very fossil cruise ship to Antarctica, and you will see how the ice is melting there. So this is ridiculous, of course. And actually, at the moment, we're also doing a campaign against the big publishers. So that's having a lot of those newspapers, to also give them the possibility to stop these ads, because it's actually at the bigger publisher. These newspapers themselves, they don't have so much influence. They always can speak up against the publisher, but the publisher is making their advertising policy. And also there's a lot of sponsorship from at sport events, museums, collaborations with universities, hospitals, and actually all the public institutions that are being neglected by the government. The fossil fuel industry is there with their money, because if they are dependent from the fossil fuel industry, the chances that they are going to speak up against them are very low. Because they often also have contracts with agreements that they're not allowed to say bad things about the fossil fuel companies. And also, if you can put your logo everywhere, people will be influenced by it. Because they're doing great things too, and we need them in our society. And they also, for example, I also work with activists from Nigeria, because Shell is doing a lot of devastation there in Nigeria, in the Niger Delta. And they're also doing a lot of sponsorships there. So people, they are so dependent, like the whole economy is dependent on Shell. Everything is dependent on Shell. So it's really difficult to then, do activism against it. And there's a lot of education for youth and children. And I will tell more about this, because that's actually where our campaign ever started. With Den Haag Fossilvrij, The Hague, that's the city in the Netherlands where also the parliament is. There was a big festival organized by Shell. And this festival was called Generation Discover. And you already see, like, at the attraction there, the big wheel, you see all the sustainable development goals. And they, for example, said that oil and gas was really important to reach the Sustainable Development Goals. And they were learning children that we will always use fossil fuels in our lives, and there was no possibility for a livable future without fossil fuels. And they invited the prime minister there, a lot of ministers for climate and economy. And there was a whole shit show. And they invited all these children from all the neighborhoods, schools. And also these children, they had to sign a contract that their photos were going to be used for the rest of ever for the campaign of Shell. So many of them didn't know it. They were just saying, okay, if you come in here, we are going to take pictures. So for regulations, for privacy, you have to have this contract. It's not a big deal. But actually, if you, and nobody was really reading the contract, but we found out that there was actually a contract that they were going to use the pictures of these children forever, or at least had the possibility for it.
Martina, just to warn you about the time, so to be a bit mindful of the time. But please go on.
Okay, good. Yes, thank you. And then we also had conversations with Marianne van Loon, the CEO of Shell, and they were like, yeah, why are you doing this action? Just have a cup of coffee with me. You're also these activists. You're always like, yeah, so there all the time. But it's all these things to just, we know, of course, that a cup of coffee, we did that years ago. It doesn't work. So we are there with our campaign. And actually, this campaign made sure that we shut down the campaign the festival next year. And then also we found out that this festival won one of the most important lobby prizes of the EU. So a children festival won a lobby prize. And we thought, okay, this is real business. So we dived into that more. And it also made, with that information, we could also ban it the next year in the municipality of The Hague. But then we thought, we don't have the capacity to shut down all the festivals and all the education material of the fossil fuel industry at schools. So we just have to have a better strategy and a bigger campaign to shut these things down. Because there's so much around that. Then we came up with this campaign and we said, okay, we do need a national regulation against the fossil fuel company, just like we have for the tobacco industry. We need a tobacco law for the fossil fuel industry and the aviation industry and the fossil car industry and actually everything that's running on fossil fuels. We started in our city in Amsterdam. Amsterdam was the first city in the world to adopt a motion to ban fossil ads in public spaces. And then our campaign ran around the world immediately because Greta Thunberg was talking about it. Maria Naira from the WHO was talking about it. Kate Raworth was talking about it. And many people around the world were inspired also by this very focused campaign on one policy outcome. We need a fossil ad ban. And in the meantime, 9 cities and 1 province in the Netherlands adopted a motion on fossil ads in public spaces. And worldwide, we have 25 wins, including a national law in France. And this national law is actually only against fossil fuel advertising. But as I also said, we don't have a lot of fossil fuel advertising because the fossil fuel industry is mostly focusing on greenwashing. So this law doesn't really do a lot. It came from a citizens' initiative. Actually, the government didn't listen to the initiative, to the advice of the citizens' initiative. So that doesn't really work, but it's a start. So a law you can always build out. And around the world, there's now 50 campaigns and 1 big campaign in Australia and Canada. In Australia, the advertising industry is carrying it and also using healthcare workers in their ads a lot. And in Canada, it's carried by the Canadian Physician of Physicians for the environment. There's a lot of physicians. And on the website worldwithoutfossilads.org, you can find all the initiatives around the world against fossil advertising. And here in the Netherlands, we are also now working, doing a lot of movement building with healthcare workers. And this was the launch of our campaign. Yeah, and you can see just like the message, or like the picture is, the image is strong, as people trust healthcare workers a lot. So the white coat stands for trust and for information, for knowledge. So it's a powerful thing to use also in your campaign. And the healthcare workers, they are like deeply concerned because they see already the effects of air pollution, but also of the climate crisis in their daily lives. So they also have strong personal stories. And then now we go a little bit more beyond. So what can there be beyond fossil propaganda in cities? As the most obvious thing is advertising in cities. We are not doing this in the name of reclame fossilvrij, but we are doing this in the name of more like ad busting collectives. So these are activists who are opening actually these advertising spaces. So you can open the whole thing and then take out the poster and replace it for the real story, or just replace it for art. It's not allowed, it's illegal, but it's a really fun way to take directly ads from the street and replace it for the real story. So this is an advertising from Shell, a fake advertising from Shell saying burn now, pay later, or our new climate policy. And then there's in the UK, they have big banners. So they use like this thing for against SUVs. The most advertisings from fossil fuel cars come from SUVs. So this says, ignore the kids, burn the planet. Then we have a campaign in the Netherlands against KLM. That's the biggest aviation company in the Netherlands. It's also the Royal Aviation Company. And they had a campaign called Fly Responsibly. And we started a court case against this advertising campaign. And it will take years. But if we win this court case, then KLM is not being able to advertise with Fly Responsibly or similar advertisings anymore. So we do use different tactics, using like movement building, but also court cases, direct action, and lobbying, of course. Another one from Fort. And I think this is a nice turning point also, because if we are taking out advertisings from the streets, there will be so much empty spaces in the first place. And we will, the joy of not being sold anything. I think that's a beautiful phrase to, we have no idea what it'd be like if we take out these advertising, as they are influencing us very unconsciously, but they are everywhere. And as we already spoke about Sao Paulo in the beginning, there's also Grenoble, a place in France, where the mayor also decided to replace all the advertising in the streets for trees and to create more community spaces. And I think this is also a very important thing to do, to think, okay, so we are taking something away that makes sure that we make sure that people then understand what the real story of the fossil fuel industry is. But if you do understand like the real story of the fossil fuel industry, and you know like how the climate crisis is threatening our daily lives and our future, then we also have to come together and create solutions for it. So we do have to replace it for something communal and something where we can like find each other and take action. So if we don't have a city with this propaganda, so it's the propaganda is like the most obvious thing is the advertising, but it's also in all these different things, like the, for example, in Amsterdam, that the fossil fuel industry is part of the economic board. There are so many influence, but if we take out this advertising, the real story of the fossil fuel industry will come to the front, and people will also believe the real story because there's no misleading advertisings more around. And also because the big companies are now taking so much of our public money to also say, okay, we're going to use this for for sustainable energy solutions, all the money should better go to community-based energy corporations. So if we don't believe anymore that these fossil fuel industries are doing anything good with the public money, also the awareness that we should put this public money into the energy corporations, so we can actually make sure that also citizens are going to gain from this energy transition, and not that there's only that not only the big energy companies are making a lot of money out of it. So yeah, and if we don't have this idea, like this influence from the fossil fuel industry anymore, it also opens doors for new ideas and imagining what another world could look like and what the end of the fossil fuel era could look like. I think Mark Fisher also said, like, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. And also advertising is having a lot of influence in it, because yeah, we are influenced by it all the time. It makes also that we don't understand like what actually it could look like. Yeah, so advertising is also one of the pillars that the capitalist system is still alive. And for example, one of the movements I'm also very interested in, I'm also part of, is the degrowth movement. And the degrowth movement, yeah, also questions in the first place advertising a lot. I'm almost done. Sorry, I see we already are reaching out an hour. I'm sorry for that. So if there's less propaganda, there's also going to be space for more trains and less airplanes, because airplane advertisings are there because to make people fly more. And now they don't have these ads anymore. So then there's going to be space for more trains. We stop the growth of the SUVs, the big cars, and there's more place for car sharing. Less cars also means more public space for the community. Politicians won't be targeted with false solutions by the fossil fuel industry. So there's also more space for better climate policy. And because the society is not being influenced so much anymore by fossil fuel propaganda, there will be more support for phasing out of fossil fuels. And I'm really curious also to hear more about your ideas. But first, to make this happen, we need a national and international law to ban all advertising from the fossil fuel industry. And then also to ban all other propaganda that there is alive. This was it. Thank you so much. And sorry for being over time.
Yes, Martine. Thank you. That's the vision. Yes. Yes. Thank you very much. Like for this lesson, but also like very, very inspiring. And also like this really like reminds us to not look at our like spaces, like in the everyday life, like as something natural. Like, but it is like really like a fight that like has been going on for a very long time, and people with a lot of money,
yeah,
influence. So you have to fight for the places where we go for, and yeah, where we go to. Well,
thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes. Does anyone has a very pressing question? Because I think we have time for one question, and if you have a question, you can open the mic and ask.
Before the question, I just wanted to highlight a few points that I took note of the talk. So thank you so much, Martine, and I think for your presentation. And I think the reason we invited you here is to act as a kind of not only as an example, but also a role model for people who want to take an activist role. And I want to highlight a few things. First, of course, the obvious focus on activism and the power of grassroots that Martine brought to us. The focus on the legal basis of their actions. Suing governments is possible where you have a strong rule of law. That's not the case everywhere. Not everywhere you can sue your government. Otherwise, you go to jail or you are tortured or other worse things. She also emphasized the communicative dimension, right? it's very important in everything they do. They are talking about communication in the public space from the fossil fuel companies through advertising, but they are also talking about who talks to our politicians, who has access to our politicians. That's very important. Another issue that I think for me is super interesting to see Martine highlight is the focus on health. I think the focus on health really covers a lot of things. The healthy city is a just city, right? A healthy, as I said in the beginning, we want people to live, and life means health. So that's a very important message, I think. And another very important thing that you said for me is the targeted policy outcome. You are not only kind of campaigning for the end of fossil fuels, but you have very targeted policy outcomes that you can say, okay, we got there with this policy, or we didn't get there, right? So do you agree with this, Martine? I don't know.
Yes, I do. Thank you so much. Just receiving comments.
Thanks. Any questions from the audience? I see one from, oh, there are questions.
It's more like a comment.
Oh, comments, yes. So capitalism is a tool for addiction made through marketing and injurious things. That's good. Thank you, Martine. Very inspiring from Dalina.
I think, no, like I think Nima has a question.
Okay, Nima, please open your mic.
Hello, and I don't know, do we have time, or I can just, if we don't have time, I can just write it down for
no,
the...
like just go, but it has to be short.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for your very inspiring lecture, but I mean, maybe you talked a little bit about it, I mean, about the question that I'm going to ask, but the important thing when we are trying to tackle with very rich and wealthy organizations such as the fossil fuels companies is that we have to be sure about the financial side of the activists. So as you said, the story about the people who clean the cigarette filter from the ground and their data being used for selling tobacco and cigarettes there, we are always threatened by getting funds from, indirectly from those companies who make these propaganda. How can we be sure about the source of money that we use for our activism, or in your experience?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. And for example, the fossil-free movement, it is funded by Rockefeller Foundation. So the Rockefellers, we all know now where it's coming from. And I think it is a very big problem in our economic world, global economic system, that philanthropies, big companies, can actually, through philanthropy, give a lot of money and have a lot of power and influence in the policy that NGOs are making. So they give a lot of money, but they won't lose any money, because it's the regulations are so that they give it away, and then on paper they make less money, so they pay less taxes. And so we also have to be, that's also a way of propaganda. And for example, one of my friends now is working with a philanthropist who is actually working on degrowth. So I think this is also a turning point where billionaires are actually working on degrowth, because they're actually then working against themselves, because degrowth is essentially working against billionaires. So I do think there is a turning point, because people are really worried, and it's also about their children, and they also know that the more money they have, it won't make them more happy, but still it is a big concern, and I don't have the answer at the moment. But what gives me hope is this, at least this one billionaire I know from my friend that is now investing in degrowth, and I think there is a turning point happening. Yeah, but a very good.
Thank you. We need to move on. Juliana, yeah, go on.
Thank you. Thank you, Martine, for your presentation. My question is about research and activism. There is still a lot of backlash when researchers, academics, they try to engage with activism. So I was wondering if you could, what is your opinion about it? How can we better collaborate? And if you see that there is a conflict of interest, just curious about your opinion.
Yeah, thanks so much for this important question. And I think also it is a matter of movement building among scientists, because now last week, the scientist rebellion, so the people that are involved, from scientists that are involved in Extinction Rebellion in the Netherlands, they were second in a very big prize around sustainability in the Netherlands. And we didn't expect this at all. But I think it's also a changing point. And I think it's so brave of the scientists who are taking the lead and who are the first movement. And it's not easy at all. And they will find a lot of backlash. But change is never going to be easy. And I think this backlash and be open about it and speak up about it and dare to share and be transparent, I think it will give you a lot of support from society. And that support will help you to break through and change the momentum.
Thank you.
Hugo, I think we need to move on to...
Yes. So
Yeah.
I go on
Thank you
that.
very much, Martine.
Yeah, thank you.
On behalf of TU Delft, we thank you very much for your contribution tonight. And now what we're gonna do is that we're gonna open the breakout rooms and we will give you some time to decide with other people from other universities on the key takeaways of the discussion today. So please don't forget to introduce yourself very briefly in the breakout room, and then maybe we can talk to other people in the room to find a group. You can talk inside there if you don't have a group already, and I will post a Google form where you can leave your thoughts. So yeah, thank you, Martine. Maybe you can say something to say goodbye.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was really an honor to be here, and sorry for taking more time from you.
No, that was
Problem.
one.
That was awesome.
Thank you so much.
Okay, good.
Thank you so much. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
I'm gonna put my email address, so if you have questions, you can also always email me, and I'm really always open to have conversations with.
Wonderful.
Thank you very
Look,
much.
every-
We have 10 minutes for the discussion.
yeah, let's make it 15 minutes, but please don't forget to copy the link. Copy the link that is in this chat, so you will know where to write, because we want to be in the same place so we can have a look at it. I'm going to create the breakout rooms now, so you are going to be assigned, and it is random. So good luck. Let's see how it works. You should now. You have to go to the breakout room. Otherwise, you are not going there. You have to accept it.
Yeah, you have to click to go.
Oh my God! Somebody's shouting. Almost lost my hearing.
It's very interesting. Also, there's way to manipulate information, right? Like, as a matter of justice, I think this is also important. Like, not all, like, communicating in a transparent way is like both difficult but essential fundamentally, because you can be doing something very wrong, but like you choose just the information that you want to give in. I think that's a good takeaway that I take from yours, Martine. It's like a reflection that I've had, like, from
Yeah, thank you so much.
your presentation.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. It's just a question. I'm gonna go away then, right? Now? Yeah.
You can leave if you want.
Yeah.
Thank
if
you
want,
so much.
that's fine.
Thank you so much.
I do have the recordings and we will be in contact. And
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Martine. See you.
Bye.
Fijne avond.